Well, my friends, I apologize. I didn't realize that I had the stream on private, and that was the reason it wasn't working. So, my apologies. I could screw up a one-car funeral. I'm pretty positive about that. Looks like we have 2 viewers now, so it must be working now. My apologies, I had it on private and didn't realize it. So, I'll start my little spiel again, and that is that I don't have a particular topic planned for this morning. It's mostly going to just be ad-lib and covering a few things that I think you might find interesting. Looks like folks are starting to sign on now, 13 viewers or more. And again, for those of you just joining, I'll repeat one more time that I started the stream promptly at 8 o'clock, but unfortunately it was in private mode and I was not aware of that. So that's what the delay is. I apologize. Got to get a few kinks out of my new way of doing the shop talks without the front end on it there. As I said just a little while ago, I could screw up a one-car funeral. There's no question about it. The first topic I want to talk about today, unfortunately, is the sad one, and that is I had mentioned in the past 2 shop talks about Jake Jacobs. He, a few weeks ago, stopped in and stayed a day or 2 at the rental retreat and left a guitar here for me to work on. And unfortunately, he came down with COVID right after he left here. Yeah, it didn't turn out well. He passed away, I'm very sorry to say. He was really a true gentleman, a really nice fellow. It was the first time I had ever met him, but he was concerned about the guitar in that, you know, he knew he wasn't going to be around forever, and he wanted to have the initials JJ inlaid into it so that whoever inherited it would also already have their initials in it, because they all their initials are JJ. So anyway, I am so sorry to learn about Jake's passing, and I send out my prayers and condolences to his family. Moving on, I hate to start out with such a bummer topic at the very beginning there, but it needed to be said, and I really did enjoy his company, and my wife did too. She was so sad to hear that he passed. Moving on to the next thing, we will be in Mountain View, Arkansas, October 14th through the 17th. Mountain View, Arkansas is just a music town. People sit around on streets and corners and under shade trees and on front porches and just play music. And that's what we're going to go down there for. We're just going to go down there and just jam and have a good time. And we hope that if you're in the available area from the October 14th through the 17th, coming up very soon, we would hope you'll come down there and join us. And of course, that means that on that particular Friday, we will not have a shop talk. And in fact, I'm leaving on that Thursday morning, so that week we probably just won't have a shop talk at all. Yeah, so that is next week? Okay, yeah, I don't have a calendar in front of me. So that's next week. We will not have a shop talk, so let's just make that official. I've got enough to do as it is, so 1 week there, we'll just have to pass. Sorry. My next item that I wanted to bring up is that I got a few gifts this week. A couple of gifts. The first thing here is some blades from Dr. Kelly. These are little saw blades that you put into a little holder, kind of like those jeweler saw blades. These are a little bit bigger, although some of these are small enough to be called jeweler saw blades, I guess you'd say. And his idea was that to give these to me and use those for that violin where I was working in that little tight slot. He felt like this might be the better way to go. And if you haven't seen that video, it was number 530, the 1880s Stradivarius Stepchild Neck Adjustment Part 2. Well, Chuck, I appreciate you sending me these blades. I do actually have quite a few of these blades in stock, but I will add these to my stock. The reason I didn't use a blade like that in that particular case is that it was it wasn't all the way through. In other words, you couldn't pass the blade through so that you could saw, number one. And number two, the slot was very, very tiny. I was using one of your scalpel blades and also the X-Acto blades to get in there. These blades are only about 14 thousandths thickness, where the thickest saw blade, which would have needed that to be stiff enough. This is 33 thousandths, so it would have probably cut about a 40 thousandths or a 1 millimeter slot. And I was really trying to keep the destruction down to a minimum. Plus, I just don't think this would have been stout enough to do any good. It would have just bent, I'm pretty sure. That was a really tough thing to clean out, but we won in the end. And I don't know if that part 2 or if the part 3 of that was out yet or not. It will be out before long if it's not. And you'll see how that turned out. It turned out pretty darn well. So thank you, Chuck. I appreciate it. We'll put those in our bin. This next gift came from Ken, and I don't think I can say his name correctly. Drew, D-R-E-W. It looks like Y-O-R, if I'm reading the handwriting correctly. And he sent me a couple of deer antlers. So thank you very much, Ken. I really appreciate that. We always can use deer antler. These were sawn off right here at the base, and that's fine if you can do it. I actually prefer them to be sawn right down through the middle here between the antlers and leave the base on there. This is perfectly acceptable, but on the other hand, that leaves a little bit more material when you do it that way, because we can cut it out. That leaves it almost another ½ an inch in length. And when you're making something only this long, that ½ an inch of really solid material is, important. But we can still make them out of this as well. So I do appreciate it very much, and we will put this in our antler collection. But if you are sending an antler, if you can, just saw it right down between the antlers and send it in that way. You can also cut off any extra outer part of that skull if you want to save weight and size, but leave the shank down into the skull, and that would be helpful. I appreciate that very much. The next topic is about t-shirts. I made a picture here. I thought this would be the best way to explain it. And you can see the different shelves of t-shirts. We have 5 different t-shirts available, 1 on each shelf. On the upper left shelf, or on the top shelf, let's just say it that way, that's the I Was Better, but I'm Getting Over It t-shirts. And you can see we have quite a few of those in stock. The next one is It's Not Easy Being Me, and we have quite a few of those in stock. And if you will look on the next one, which is It's Simple But It's Complicated, that one there, we're out of the large. And if you notice, they go from large, extra large, double extra large, and triple extra large is on the right. So it starts from the left to the right, and it's large, double extra large, and triple extra large. And then you go down to the 4th shelf, and that's Everything's a Hammer, and you can see we're a little low on the double extra large. And then finally on the last one, we're a little low on the standard extra large. Why am I showing you all this? Is because I'm going to phase all this out. We're going to sell our inventory that we have in stock. You can see what's in stock there, and I thought that was better to just show you what's in stock. I will try to update the website to have the stock there, but that may be more than I can handle on this particular situation. But anyway, my point is I wanted to show it to you. We will probably be phasing these out. These are, for those of you who aren't aware, they're incredibly soft fabric. This is a very high grade t-shirt. It's not your standard t-shirt at all. And you will know that instantly when you buy them and put them on. They are super, super soft, and I paid extra for all of that. So these are just not your standard average Walmart t-shirt. So I just thought I'd mention that, and I think they're a bargain because we're selling them far cheaper than most folks sell their t-shirts for. And you're getting a much higher quality t-shirt to boot. So what we have there is what we have, and when those are gone, there probably won't be any more. So there you go. I was better, but I'm getting over it. And that's the way I feel this morning. Yesterday afternoon and evening, I worked on the Bobcat. I showed you pictures of that last week and showed you how the tracks were off of it. Well, I got the big new sprockets mounted and I got the tracks back on it. I did a lot of welding too, and that's the next topic I want to show you. You know, this little welder, I did a short video on this a while back. It's the Harbor Freight Titanium MiG 140. Ladies and gentlemen, I got to tell you something. This is a heck of a machine. I am not kidding you. There's only been a few things I've ever purchased from Harbor Freight that I've thought were just excellent. Only a few. Most of them are just like kind of marginal. They're okay. They're good for the price, etc. They get the job done, you know, that kind of thing. This is different. This machine is an incredible welder at any price. At any price, even if I had to pay $1,000 for this machine is probably worth that. But you don't have to pay $1,000 for it. It's a lot cheaper than that. So if you've ever needed a welder or ever wanted to think about getting into welding, this Titanium 140, you can't go wrong with this thing. I'm seriously telling you. I have welded up a whole horse trailer, and I'm everything from really thick stuff to really, really thin stuff, and it welds it all. And yesterday then on my Bobcat, there was, I'll go back to the large screen, there were grooves, wear grooves, where the tracks would wear on these wear plates. And, they're not really supposed to hit these plates, but if, when the cogs get wore down, the tracks get wore down, then they will hit these wear plates. Well, it wore, a groove in the plate as big around as my little finger, for about this length. And I started welding it. I thought, well, I'll have to turn that little welder up really hot for this kind of thick steel, And I turned it up to about almost as hot as it could go. I think it only goes to a 17 or something like that. And I think I had it up to 16 or 16 and a half. And I started burning right through it. I went, wow. So I backed it off, and then I was still too hot. So I backed it off some more, and then I was able to fill in the holes where I had burnt through. Plus, it had worn through in a place or two. So I filled in all those holes. Then I turned it back up to about medium heat, and then filled in that whole trough, and then ground it off smooth, and you can't even tell it. I mean, it just did an awesome job. So, and then, if you don't know anything about welders, that's called a MIG welder, and that means it has a wire spool, and it just has a continuous feed of wire. So you don't have to go get different electrodes and stick them in and all that. It just continually feeds the wire. And I have a 10-pound wire roll in it now. I've already gone through one full 10-pound of wire. I've gone through about 2 of the 2-pounders. Before I went to the 10-pound, I said, well, the 2-pound thing just isn't lasting for me. So I got the 10-pound, and I went through one of those. So that's like 14 pounds of wire. And then I've probably used a third of this next 10-pound roll. So I've done a lot of welding with it. My point is to tell you that I am absolutely convinced this is a real machine. And for the money, you cannot go wrong. So if you've ever thought about getting a welder, even just if you're just a guy in a subdivision that has just occasionally tries to fix your own stuff, you can plug this thing into just your standard outlet. You don't need a welding outlet for this. Any place you can plug in, like your skill saw, you can plug this in and weld. It's just blows my mind that it works this well. Now, the only caveat I have there is my luck never works this way, but maybe I got the only good machine they had. You know, maybe yours won't work that way, but as far as I can tell, this thing is rock solid. Now, I did put a video out about that a while back that showed you how to set it up. You do have to follow that specific setup to make this thing work like I'm telling you. It didn't work all that well when I first got it. I was a little disappointed. Then once I started researching and figuring out the right setup, it worked. It was just like night and day difference. So make sure you follow my setup guidelines. All right, moving on to the next thing. This I'm just doing because I want to. I want to show you this. Let me go back for just a second and tell you that this is my granddaughter, Kaylee. I was thinking I had my picture inset in there, and I didn't. I forgot. Sorry. But this is my granddaughter, Kaylee, and she is the one on the back row and the farthest to the right, standing there, a tall girl with really long hair. So I just wanted to give her a little press time because she's always been so active in her chorus or in choral group. This is just a short video. So that was my granddaughter, my oldest granddaughter, Kaylee. My daughter, Lisa, that's her oldest daughter. And I thought they did a nice job. And that was at the Eureka High School in Eureka, Missouri. And that's right next to Six Flags. If you've ever been passing through on Highway 44 and saw Six Flags, that's where it is. Anyway, I think that covers all the things that I was planning to talk about. So if you've got time, if you want to, you can put your 3 question marks in there. Actually, I'm going to show you a couple more things here too, just in the shop, but you can start putting your questions in there and be sure to start them with a question mark. One thing I wanted to show you is this guitar right here. This is a 00 Martin guitar. And when you first looked at it out of the box, you think, well, there's not that much wrong with this. But when you start looking at it close, this is one of those where it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse the longer you look at it. It just is horrible. I elected to take the top off, which is kind of out of the ordinary. Most people take the back off, and I would normally do that too. Except that this top was already loose about this far, so on the back here. So I thought, well, if it's already loose there, why fight it, you know? So I started on, and it came apart pretty easily until I got up here. And this was a little bit tough. What I did was I just pulled this fret and sawed it across. Now, some of you will just instantly just hate that because I cut that fretboard in half. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter at all. Because, you know, your fret is cut almost all the way through the board anyway. So there's only about 40 to 50 thousandths of an inch of wood left anyway. So I just sawed through that last little tiny piece of wood and then just lifted this top off. Far easier way, far shorter, faster way, far simpler way, and does no damage up here to the neck, see? Because if you took all this off, then you'd have all that finish splintered and chipped and everything, and We don't have that now. So when we put this back together, the only thing you'll see, if you see anything at all, is a little tiny wire, because I use that razor saw. It's only 8/1000ths of an inch. So it's like 2 human hairs thick. That's the only thing you'll see, and you can easily fill that and color it in. So why did I take it apart? Well, yeah. First of all, if you look from the outside, the bridge was coming off, and I went ahead and took the bridge off before I took it apart. But then there's just cracks everywhere, and I don't know how well you can see it, but there's just lots of cracks. You can see the center seam crack, and then there's big cracks, and it just was messed up. It just obviously was messed up. But I looked on the inside, obviously, before I did that, and there's loose bracing. This top was really arched. Let me show you something here. I think I'll get instead of the clear ruler, I'll use the dark solid ruler here that you can see. If you look and see from the back to the back, if you look here, it's just as flat as a pancake. I'm laying that ruler on that flat section, and it's like nearly a 1/2 inch high right here. And, so it's really pulled up. I mean, super pulled up. And the same way on the edges here, too. It's really pulled up. Now, it could be that this was actually made with a slight arch in it, but this isn't slight. And from one side to the other, it doesn't match. This side over here is, I take it back. This side over here is relatively flat. In fact, if you look at it, you can see it's fairly flat. But over here, it's not flat at all. It goes up in the air quite a bit. So it's not symmetrical across there. So I know that it was pulled. So then I take the mirror and I look inside it, and I see this. Random piece of wood number 1. Random piece of wood number 2, right there. Random piece of wood 3, 4, and 5 right here. Let me go back and do my PSA one more time, because obviously it's not getting through. Whenever you have the urge to glue a random piece of wood inside your guitar, call me or call your best friend, call your psychiatrist. Whatever you need to do, but just don't glue a random piece of wood up inside your guitar. Just fight the urge with all your being. And you can see that the glue, it just kind of got a little messy. Just a little messy. Not real messy, just a little messy. Oh my gosh. And I don't know. I don't know if these braces were carved this way from the factory for sure on this, or if somebody tried to carve that through the sound hole. I'd say they were from the factory because they look a little too good on that part. I don't think they could have done that job very well through the sound hole. So that was probably done that way, but the bracing was probably a little too thin. And that's probably where the whole problem started, because it is really carved. You can see very, very thin. When you thin it that much over the 40, 50 years life of the instrument like that, it's going to have an effect. You can go thin, but you can't go quite that thin. What I do a lot of times is I'll leave the brace a little taller, but then I thin it on the sides. And that, because you're doing it that way, it's stronger. But when you cut them this way and you dish that out to that thin, nah, you've kind of hurt yourself. And, oh, I missed one of the random pieces of wood down here. I missed that toothpick there. So those are toothpicks. Now, using toothpicks as cleats is just not advisable. Don't do it, okay? Resist the urge. All right, so anyway, this has got a lot of work ahead of it, as you might guess. It honestly, and I'm telling you this ahead of time, when you finally see this video, and it might be a month or two down the road before you see this video, it did not come apart easily. It created a lot of problems, lots of issues. I'm not going to go into those now, but this was one of those days where you kind of wish you didn't come into work when I took this apart. So you'll see all that later. I'm not going to go into it now, though, because it's just... And you'll hate me when you watch me take this apart. You're going to say, he's an amateur. He doesn't know what he's doing. Well, I've already fixed all the damage I caused. Now I got to fix the damage from prior. Yeah, this is the... Here. More random pieces of wood. More just random pieces of wood. Yeah. And the glue is... just a tiny bit sloppy, just a tiny. You should try to fix them through the sound hole if you can. Operative word is if you can. Not if you may, if you can. Oh my gosh, that thing's a mess. Now, I want to tell you something. Do not be confused. There's another one of these 0018s that you'll probably see the video on before you see this one. That one, do not be confused. There's two of them, okay? This is just one of them. The other one, Caleb put a whole new top on it and everything because it was, believe it or not, worse than this one by a long shot. Believe it or not. So there you go. So don't be confused because you will see that one probably before you see this one. Here's the current status of the last hurrah. It's had about 4 very, very light applications of varnish applied. And they're very light applications. And you can see how everything's darkened up. It's really turning out pretty. It doesn't look all that great yet. I'm going to put a couple of more coats on it before I do the first sanding, leveling, and stuff. Probably, maybe, in fact, I may put another 3 or 4 coats on it before I do the first sanding, leveling, so that I don't really sand through too much. But it is turning out really nice. You might wonder, why do I have the whole neck taped off? Because the fellow I'm building this for, I mean, he doesn't know I'm building it for him, but he's a pretty good picker. So I just, the people that ordered it for this person told me to do what I would do on the neck. So I'm going to oil the neck and leave it natural. It'll look pretty, believe it or not, and you won't really even hardly be able to tell that it's not finished. I mean, it actually looks pretty darn good, but it feels so much slicker when you're playing. And because he's a pretty good picker, I think he'll enjoy that, and more than likely he'll be wanting me to take the finish off of more instruments down the road after he plays this one that way. But it's going to be a nice looking guitar, I think, once we're done with it. Long ways to go yet, kind of an ugly duckling thing. Part 2 of this build, I think, will be out either today or very soon, like this weekend for sure. So it's coming up real soon. Okay, questions. Let's see if we can get to them here. That's everything I was going to cover, and I'm going to back up here and see where I see the first bunch of question marks popping up. Bob L. Jerry, is your recording studio coming on? Yeah, I've basically got it back online now in my quote-unquote man cave up there, and it's working. And I've ordered a few new microphones and a few things. To be honest, I'm going through a learning curve again on how to use that machine. I could just use some of that software that they put on PCs, I know, and do that, but I've got that machine. It's a digital machine, a digital workstation, and I do like to use it. It works really well, so I'm just going to keep using that since I have it, you know. But I'm kind of going through a learning curve on relearning it because it's been several years since I used it. So anyway, I've lost track of where that was now, and I see another one here. Hello, sir. Intonation usually go wrong when switching your acoustic guitar to a different alternate tuning. Okay, I'm assuming. All right, that's being a question is. I'm assuming that's what you're experiencing. That your tuning is, you have to retune and all that, and your intonation isn't correct when you do a different kind of tuning. It's not real rocket science. I mean, there really isn't too much to it. Now, some people will argue all day about it, but in my book, it's just black and white. It's not gray. It's just simply that your saddle is not in the right place. Now, I make one caveat, and that is, the assumption is that your frets were all, cut correctly. Your whole fretboard and all that, I'm assuming, is a factory-made fretboard, and therefore it's 99.9% chance it's correct. Assuming that the fretboard itself is correct, assuming that your nut is set on the end of the fretboard correctly, making those two assumptions, then the only thing that creates problems with your intonation is where your saddle is. I mean, it's just black and white. Now, I know lots of people, and we've talked about this before, think you can adjust it by changing your nut around and all that. And I say you can also, I agree, but you're only doing a compromise when you do that. You're not fixing the problem. You're compromising. You're making some notes better, some notes worse when you do that. That's not my belief. That's a black and white fact. You can believe what you want, but that's a fact. Okay, so that's your problem, is your saddle's not in the right place. You just need to get that fixed if you really are for sure that your intonation is wrong. The only other thing that I could say about that would be that, if your action's super high or something, that could affect it as well. The next thing here, Alan Dust, our good friend Alan, who's supported us quite a bit and sent us some stuff, and his drill sanders are awesome. We've been using those a lot. I used it a whole lot on this last Hurrah guitar, so that worked out really good. Since I've had the two Cherries chisels for a few months now, how are you still happy with them? Good question, Alan. Yes, I really do like them. Sure, there's probably better ones out there, but for the money and for the variety that comes in that set, I absolutely love them. They're good. They hold a good edge. Yeah, there's nothing. I have no negatives to report on those two Cherry chisels. They're very, very good. So. Again, I like to assign the money to what I recommend. You could probably spend 3 times that much and get a very good chisel. Would you be able to tell in a blind test which one you had in your hand? Probably not. So that's why I say the two Cherry chisels for the money is just absolutely a great set. Okay. Narbonne Guitars. Have you ever added binding to already made acoustic? Well, other than repair-wise, I don't think so. But I mean, it could be done. I don't see a big problem with doing it. The difference is that you've probably already got a finish there, so you're going to be messing that up for sure, and you may have some chip out from the finish. So there's some negatives of doing it after it's already been finished, but it could be done. Let's see. Yeah, Zappa1 there, he commented, oh, those are some nasty cracks on that guitar, I guess he's talking about. Yeah, it's not pretty. It's just really bad. It just warped up really bad, and all the bracing is already on that guitar is already set into those, because the material cost isn't the issue at all. It's always the time. And so you often have to just decide what to do. And this is just a general tip to all luthiers. You have to do what saves the time in many cases, because that's what will make sense on the final bill. I mean, if you don't save the time, then the final bill is 2 or 3 times what it should be. Now, the exception would be if this was a super collectible, highly sought after guitar, then you want to keep it as original as possible. There's a lot of these out there. It's not that kind of a collectible guitar. Yeah, you still want to respect it. You still want it to be as original as possible, but at some point you got to cut your losses. And that's where we're kind of at on this thing. We may have to cut our losses. Earl Elfrink, an old guy from the past that I used to jam with, he says, what kind of camera software and operating system do you use your video production? Well, on my cameras, originally, those old videos and a lot of these from the archive that you're seeing, those were made with just some cheap, I forget what kind of camera you call that, just a standard video camera that I bought from a pawn shop. I'm trying to think what you call it, just a digital video camera. Those weren't very good. Actually, they were okay. But the sound quality on the one I had would go up and down. I mean, one minute you'd be talking and the sound would be perfect, perfect level. The next minute it would be really loud. The next minute it would be so quiet you couldn't even hear it. So that was why I switched to, and what you're asking about is what I have presently. I switched to the Canon, and it's a T7i, I believe is what it's called. I may have those numbers scrambled a little bit, but anyway, it's T7i, I believe, is the correct numbers. Now, that's just a standard DSLR camera, but they do video as well. And what I really like about these particular cameras, and I'm pointing to it, you can't see it. There it is. Can't see it very well even now. But what I really like about these cameras is that the little built-in microphone is perfect. Now, it's perfect for indoor use. It's not necessarily perfect for outdoor as it is, because you'll hear wind noise and all of that. But for indoor use, this thing is perfect. Here's, Caleb just gave me his here. And yes, it's a T7i, the EOS T7i. I swear by these things. These things are awesome. I've always said, now see, you can do better. You can get extra mics and all of that kind of gear, and you can have all kinds of setup stuff. But if it gets complicated, see, my main job is to fix instruments. The video thing was a secondary thing. Now, I'll be the first to admit the video has become much more important lately. Over the last year or two, it's become much more important. But even still, my main job is to fix instruments. If I have to do a ton of other setup work and spend hours and, or even just minutes a day wasted setting up camera stuff, I'm not going to do it. It's just too much. It just takes too much away from my main job. With this, you don't have to do anything. All you do is point the camera, turn it on. I mean, that's pretty much it. It's autofocus, and some people get on me about that. They say, you should never use autofocus. Well, again, that's too much extra work, too much extra time. I'm not going to do it. If the autofocus don't work, it just don't work. That's all. You get what you get when you see my videos. I'm sorry about that. I'm not trying to, this is not Hollywood. But having said that, just these by themselves do a pretty dang good job in keeping up with everything. So, yes, it's the T7i, and mine is actually not a T7i, but it's the equivalent. It's the European version of it, and mine is the 800D, the EOS 800D. It's the same camera, pretty much. There's some very minor differences in the software and a few little minor differences here and there, but they're basically the very same camera. So I've got 3 of these, actually, I think is what I have. Mm-hmm. So anyway, the point is, this is a really good outfit. That's all I use. For the software, we're using various different softwares. Caleb has been using his own software, the Adobe Premiere, for editing the videos and things. And of course, that's the superior type software. There's no question about that. But again, I go with what's easy, what's cheap, it's simple for me. And I'm using Corel Studio, Corel Video Studio. Now, Corel Video Studio has one real bad drawback, and that is it will crash every once in a while. So you have to save often. It does crash. The older versions of it crashed a lot more. I mean, like they might crash 8 or 10 times in an hour. You know, I mean, that was terrible. Now it might not crash at all during the whole editing of a video, or it might crash once, you know, or maybe sometimes twice. But it's not too terribly bad now. So, and I'm talking about the 20, I think I have the 2020 version of it. I think that's the one I have, 2020 version, or maybe the 2021, I'm not sure. But I have a fairly current version of it, and that version seems to be a little bit more stable. But it's cheap, and it's much easier learning curve than any of the other videos editing softwares I've tried. I've tried a bunch of them, actually. The DaVinci Resolve is very, very good, and it's free. Very, very good. But the learning curve on it is just crazy. You know, it's just really hard. That's what Melissa used to use when she was here. So that's a good one too. DaVinci Resolve is completely free. You just can download it, and it's an awesome package. It's more powerful, possibly, than any of the other packages, because it's one of the top-rated packages out there. But it's super hard to learn, also. So there you go. Hope that answered it for you. There, Earl. Good to hear from you, Earl. Let's see, it scrolled up on me again, sorry, so I'm having to, when you touch this thing, it will automatically jump up the screen a lot of times, so I have to find that and come back to it. Well, also my big one is not working. I'm using this little tiny chat window again, and it's, I don't know, I can't get them linked up here. Not working well. Clyde has a question. Clyde Lewis, when you work on a guitar that has had the new binding channel cut too deep, it leaves a bump or dip in the binding. How do you prefer to fill that? Well, Clyde, I've run into different and various sundry binding issues, and I don't know that I have a black and white explanation for that, or a remedy or cure for that. The obvious answer is you try to avoid that with all, you know, as much as you can by cutting the slot as accurately as you can. And for the most part, I don't have too much of that problem, so I don't really run into that very often. Now, back in the old days, I did. And a lot of times what I would do, and I still do this, because a lot of this binding and stuff I have to do on the mandolins has to be done by hand. And you're going to have that kind of issue. And what I do is I just take the little needle type files and get in there and actually file the bumps off. And actually, you know, you go around the curve of it and take the file and actually just smooth it off. And you'll be surprised how much you can do with that. If that doesn't work, then I have to resort to the chisels and or scrapers and little things like that, little X-Acto blades and stuff, and get in there and cut it as smooth as I can. So my preference is not to fill it, it's to smooth it if I can. Now, if the channel's just too deep, well, then you kind of got a problem. My preference, I guess, in that case would be to put on a thicker binding. That's what I would. That would be my preference, Clyde. I'm sorry, Clyde, if I'm not answering your question specifically, but that's the best I got, and I hope that helps you. Timothy Dockery. Sometimes when you remove guitar top or back, it doesn't always want to line back up when you're regluing it. How do you handle this? Well, Timothy, you hit it right on the head. Let me state what you just stated much stronger than that. They never line back up. And you might, some of you out there going, yeah, right. It can't be that hard. They never line back up perfectly. I say never. 1 out of 100 might. It's like they just don't line back up. They always fight you. There's always something, like as soon as it's like they're under tension, and when you take that back off, bingo, they just change shape. They don't change it where you really notice it, but when you start putting it back together, you notice it. Yeah, it's every time. How do I fix that? Well, I try to start at one point and work around. I reach in through the sound hole, I push the sides out. You just got to take your time with it, and you just got to work it together slow. You can't just glue the whole thing and just stick the top on there and start clamping. It won't work. I mean, it will work, but it won't work well. So yeah, you just kind of got to work from one point and work around. And sometimes it's even good to do a little dry run and put your clamps on there. And I'm not kidding you, I've done this a lot. I'm not just talking, I do this. I'll clamp things up and see if I can reach in there and force things out. And I do it dry before I put the glue on it, especially if I know there's a real problem, and sometimes I might even make a stick or something that'll stick inside the guitar that I can force the sides out with. And sometimes you get that in such a place where you can't really get it out later, and you'll either just have to reach in there with a pliers and cut it in half, or something like that, and just get rid of that stick later, and saw it in half or whatever. But there are almost endless possibilities on the way it won't line up. If you stop and think about it from the odds perspective, the odds are that 1 in a couple million or something that it will line up perfectly. The odds are really good it won't line up, and that's just the way it works. So you hit the nail right on the head. It never lines up. That's another reason why you don't really want to take them apart if you don't have to. And that's just something people don't realize. They think, oh, just take it apart, fix it. Yeah, okay, fine. But you'll also have to do a neck reset when you take them apart. You better be paying attention to your neck reset as you put it back together, because you can take one that's perfectly set up, absolutely perfect, and then take the back off, and when you put it back together, it may not play worth a crap, because you'll have that neck just it only takes a tiny bit to change everything. So keep that in mind when you take them apart. You are dealing with a mess when you take an instrument apart. Right there. Okay. How do you care for bare wood neck? Well, I prior to us finding this newer product, we've always used boiled linseed oil. And I still have no problem with boiled linseed oil on a bare neck. I think it's an excellent choice. But the thing is, you put it on and you almost instantly wipe it right back off, and you wipe it off as dry as you can get it, and then in some cases you need to come back in another 5 or 10 minutes and wipe it off again. It depends a lot on the wood, but you don't want to leave it puddled up for sure. You want to wipe it back off. Okay, that's the cheapest, easiest way to do it, is just boiled linseed oil. But the newer stuff that we've got here, I like pretty well. I can't guarantee I like it that much better than boiled linseed oil, but this is really good. This is that Be Good wood oil, and it goes right on bare wood. And this is food grade stuff, so you can put it on with your hands, and you can lick it off your fingers if you want to. It's got it's got beeswax in it and stuff like that. You know, all that stuff's really good for you. You nature people out there. Don't get me started. You vegan folks, you know how I am. I'm totally carnivorous, so I'm not a vegan. Anyway, the point is this stuff's good. This Be Good oil. And you can get this, well, you can probably Google it. It would be your best bet. But I'm trying to think of the name of this. Green River, it says www.greenriverwoods.com. So that's one place to get it. I think I got it from Klingspor, Klingspor, I think is the supply company, woodworking supply that I got it from, Klingspor. Okay, is the rental retreat available year-round? Yeah, basically, Michael, it is. You know, as I'm winding things down, and as I'm getting older and may not be able to cut firewood up there, the rental retreat may go away entirely. But right now it is. Take MSM. I've already tried MSM. It didn't help at all. Sorry. Honestly, guys, you probably can't suggest anything at this point that I haven't tried. And not one single thing has helped. My latest thing I'm trying is I'm swearing off of iced tea. I love iced tea. And you know, you got to remember, you probably can't relate to this. My diet is so tiny compared to most people's diets. It's tiny. I mean, I only eat a few things, just a few things. And to have to cut something out, it just kills me because I don't eat much at all anyway. So cutting out the iced tea is killing me, but I've cut it out. I'm going to cut it out for, I've not had any now for a couple of weeks, and I'm trying to see if that helps my joints because they say that the tea is an inflammatory, and I've used to drink a lot of iced tea, so I'm going to give it a try. I haven't felt any relief yet in 2 weeks, but I'll give it a couple of months here and see if I start feeling any better. No, honestly, by the way, the arthritis, it's exponential. I made the right decision when I sent all those deposits back on those guitars. I can't build them anymore. I just can't. It's just killing me. Tim Carper, maybe I've skipped here. This has moved on me. Okay, yeah, I did. I skipped a little bit here. Gene Gambardella, what could cause buzzing from the bridge area? The main cause will be the angle that your saddle is cut and your string coming over your saddle. And I'm exaggerating, but let's say this is the top of your saddle. I mean, that's a huge, huge saddle, but your saddle should have an angle like this, and your string leaves at that point right there and goes. It won't buzz like that. Now I'm taking the other extreme. This is your tail end. Your string is anchored down here, and it comes over like this, and it comes across your saddle. It's going to buzz across your saddle if your saddle is flat, or, you know, in other words, your saddle has to have a slight angle to it. Some saddles are rounded and crowned and have the high point right in the dead center middle. That's okay. It's not my preference. I prefer that they leave right there. Just like your nut, it leaves on that. Coming the other way, the last place it should touch would be right there on that high point. Those two high points are the places it should touch. That will also help your intonation, but it will also help your buzzing. That's where it will buzz. If you're hearing the buzz at the bridge end, it's definitely your saddle. And I say that there's only one other possibility, and the other possibility is the serving is actually physically loose on the string. In other words, on those big strings that have the windings around it, that winding can be loose and it can rattle. It doesn't happen very often, but it can happen. I've heard it multiple times. Okay. Next question, Tim Carper. I was recently chastised for oiling my tuners. No, yeah, Tim, you were doing the right thing. Yeah, people are just silly. They just have these ideas, these wives' tales, these things that they've heard, these, I'm black and white telling you, for the most part, there's always exceptions, but they're rare. I could say for sure 90% of the time, 90%, and I really want to say 99%, that's what I really want to say, your tuners just don't slip, period. People are always worried about their tuners slipping. They don't slip. You can believe what you want to believe. It's the way you use your tuner is what makes them sound like they're slipping or feel like they're slipping. You always, and I've said this bazillions of times, you always tune up to the note. That gets rid of what they call backlash. All tuners have backlash. The Waverly tuning keys that I've been buying have the least amount of backlash of any tuning key I've ever seen. They have almost none, but nothing has none. There is no such thing as zero backlash. So you always have to tune up to the note. If you ever tune down to the note, you've just introduced your backlash. And that will pull and it'll make you feel like your tuner has slipped. Always tune up. And the way they're designed with that worm gear, and I know there's some other terms and everybody always corrects me every time I call it worm gear. I don't care what you call it, guys. It doesn't matter to me. But that worm gear that's in there spinning as opposed to the round, just standard type gear, it can't slip. It's opposite and opposed, and one won't spin the other. You have to use the crank to spin them. You can't take that post and spin it. You couldn't put a vice grip on that post and spin that other gear. You couldn't do it. It'll twist that post right off. I guarantee you it will twist the post off. They don't slip. You can believe what you want, but they're designed in such a way that they don't slip. It's just the backlash. So Tim, you were doing the right thing by oiling them. You can oil them till the cows come home. It won't cause a problem at all because they still won't slip. You can grease them if you want to. It'd be a little messy, but you could. 3-in-1 oil, by the way, won't hurt your guitar if it gets on the wood. I can actually show you in writing where I've read about Martin recommending 3-in-1 oil for your fretboard. So it's not a bad idea. Oil on bare wood is always generally a good idea, actually. Depends, you don't want to use motor oil on your neck. Unless you really want it dark. I wouldn't use motor oil. But other than that, most any other oil is fine. The only other kind of oil you got to worry about is vegetable type oils because they can become rancid. They can actually stink. So you don't want that. Ever heard of Aspen guitars? Yeah, I have, but nothing off the top of my head that I can think of. It needs a bridge, so I was wondering if it's worth it. I believe it's from the 70s. Yeah, well, I have to give you my standard cop-out answer, and that is, if it's worth it to you, it's worth it. And I don't say that to sound smug or to have some kind of a cute byline. I really mean it. I mean, if it's worth it to you, it's worth it. You don't have to worry about the rest of the world, If it's worth it to you, it's worth doing. So that would be my answer on that. Now, that's assuming that you're doing the work. Now, if you're going to pay some high-dollar guy to do it, well, then you do have a point. It may be a cheap guitar, and you may have to spend $400 or $500 to get it done, and then you might want to reconsider. But still in all, I still say, even then, if it's worth it to you, it's worth it. So there you go. It's the best I got. Sorry. I can't really speak to the Aspen specifically because I don't remember them that much. We're about out of time. We're at 9:03 here, so I was a little late getting this thing started this morning. We got 176 viewers. Very good. I'm going to take 2 more questions, and we're going to call it good. How many Rosa-made instruments are out there in the wild? I'd have to look and see, but in the neighborhood of 50-something. Very close to that. I don't really know exactly off the top of my head without looking. I don't keep those little facts in my head. Would you consider renting out your shop with supervision to other people interested in Lutherie, not being able to afford the setup of fun shop? You know, Gordon, I don't know. That's not a bad idea. I had thought about starting some Lutherie schools and things like that in the past, and to be honest, I was trying to get one of those going a number of years ago, probably right before I started YouTube, and I just couldn't get enough interest, to be honest. But I probably not right now, but if I wind this down some more because of my arthritis, then yeah, I'd probably consider that. Let's just see here. Is there any more questions? I think that's it. So I do appreciate you all joining in this morning, and I hope you've learned something today, or helped. Maybe it was interesting for you. I hope that worked out for you. I say one more time. Oh, by the way, there was one other Harbor Freight tool I meant to show you, and I forgot. So I'm glad I thought of it. This one. There's only been 2 Harbor Freight tools that I bought that I absolutely swear are as good as anything you can buy anywhere. One of them is that welder I already told you about. This is the other one. This thing, God, the thing is heavy. I'm seriously telling you, this thing is heavy. What is it? It's an impact wrench. This is the 1/2-inch Earthquake 20 volt. I'm not sponsored by Harbor Freight. They don't even know I'm telling you this. I have no reason to tell you this other than it's a dang good tool. This thing will twist a 1/2-inch bolt off in a heartbeat. I mean, it's that powerful. And you think, well, I don't want to twist my 1/2-inch. You get my point. Like if you're putting, like if you're just doing wheel lug nuts and things like that. Like I had to work on this Bobcat. I was killing myself trying to get the drive sprocket lug nuts off. I mean, those suckers were tight. I put this, and I'm talking, they were tight doing it with a breaker bar and trying to get them off that way. I put this thing on there and it just backed them off like they were butter. I'm seriously telling you, this is one powerful machine. This is the 1/2-inch. Now this is the long shank. I actually wanted the short shank, but they didn't have those the day I was there to buy it, and I needed one, so I went ahead and bought the long shank. I'm okay with the long shank too, but you know, it doesn't fit into all the tight spots as well as the shorter shank one would. This is the 1/2-inch. They make a 3/8. I also have the 3/8. After I bought this one and saw how good it was, I went and bought the 3/8. The 3/8, quite honestly, is nothing like this one in terms of power, but it's pretty good. It's pretty good too. I don't have any negative things to say about the 3/8 one. But I'm seriously telling you right now, if you've got something that's hard to do and you're doing a lot of it, this thing will change your life. I know I've got the air ones. I've got the air tool versions of these. I would put this up against anything that you could throw at it. I had to take one of the heavy lug bolts. Well, it was broke off on the Bobcat. So while I'm changing all this, I wanted to fix that lug bolt that was broke off. Well, I had to heat it up red hot and drive it out with a punch, and it was not easy to drive out. It took a lot, and I thought, well, now how am I going to get that new one in there? And so I tried to put the new one in, you know, and just to see if it would fit, and it wasn't even starting in the hole. I mean, it was that tight. I just put the nut on it and put a big couple of heavy washers on it, put this on there, and it sucked it right up inside that hole. And trust me, it was all it wanted. This thing was struggling at on that thing, but it pulled it in there. So seriously telling you, this thing's worth its weight in gold too. Okay, those are my 2 public service announcements for today in terms of products. You really should get those if you do that kind of work. You don't have to worry that they're going to work for you. They will work for you. So, thank you so much. We will not see you next Friday because I'll be in Arkansas. So, the Friday afterwards, we'll continue with our shop talks. I hope you will join me then. Thank you so much.